I think I would be remiss in talking about my Tulane journey if I didn't start by talking about the journey that I have with my kids, as they are kind of the inspiration for everything that I do, and especially being here at Tulane. So I have 4 kids, Giacomo, Gianna, Lucas, and Isadora, and they all have a degenerative neurological condition called myotonic dystrophy. It's a rare disease that most people have never heard of before. It affects virtually every organ system in the body, and there is no cure, and it often is described as the most complex medical condition out there because it just manifests itself so differently in everyone. So we have quite a journey with them, and as soon as we got the diagnosis, which was back in 2010 when I was pregnant with my 4th child, I had spent 4.5 years with my oldest son trying to figure out what was going on with him. So I saw dozens of different doctors and therapists. There was all kinds of testing, and the general consensus was basically either there's nothing wrong with him, he's a boy, I'm crazy, he'll outgrow it, et cetera, or this is what's wrong with him, and then that would lead to a misdiagnosis, or there's something wrong and we don't know what it is. And so that was pretty traumatic for me to kind of go through that, what we call medical abrasion. And then finally got the diagnosis for him and then my other 2 kids, and then the baby after she was born a few months later. And from that moment, I knew that for whatever reason, this is the kind of coin flip of life that I got, and that I wanted to do something more with it. And so in 2018, I started a nonprofit organization called MyVita, and it's My-Vita, so the My, partly for myotonic dystrophy, their disease, and partly for my as in taking, one's own. And Vita means life in Spanish, and so My-Vita is all about making the most of life, helping people to really thrive in that little dash of punctuation, which is what makes our entire life up from when we're born until we die. And I wanted to really find a way to help support people in that. My background is that I was a birth doula, a childbirth educator, lactation consultant, and so I've literally supported thousands and thousands of families during that really vulnerable time of their life, a time that a lot of people describe as being in survival mode. And I thought, how do parents are supposed to be making their baby thrive, but they're barely surviving. And that's the same thing that happens when people have these childhood onset chronic illnesses, that they now just enter this survival mode, this triage mode. And so I started the nonprofit organization, and shortly after that, my son Giacomo actually ended up in the ICU for 4 months after a near-death experience that happened, that he almost died as a result of physicians not listening to me. And as I sat in that ICU, I thought, this is great that I have this idea, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And if something like this could happen to me, this very outspoken white woman of privilege with education and knowledge about this disease, just think of all the families that maybe don't have that same support, that same experience and privilege. And so I decided that I wanted to learn a little bit more, and I ended up at Tulane actually on a complete whim. I was soaking in the tub one night and a Facebook ad popped up for the Disaster Resilience Leadership Academy, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I had known about Tulane from a friend who went to school here, and I saw that there was a little snippet about nonprofit leadership, and I thought maybe this is what I need. And so before I knew it, I was in a dual master's program to get a master's degree in social work, which I realized that I already was kind of doing a lot of social worky like work in my own experience, but really got more in depth in that. And also that the disaster piece really appealed to me, because when you're living with chronic illness and taking care of someone, everything, as I mentioned, is triage. And so that's a lot of what happens in disaster recovery, response, mitigation, all of those things, because people are living in these little mini disasters of life. And so I really wanted to help. I swore that I was going to be all done with school at that point, and then instead, in the very last semester, I saw this opportunity for the DRPH program at Tulane, and I loved that it was focused on leadership, that it was focused on equity, and that really kind of taking those social determinants of health to the next level. And this very much boots on the ground project applied experience really appealed to me, as I felt like this is exactly what I needed to help truly launch the nonprofit organization. As life happens, things kind of evolve and shift along the way, and some of those shifts for me were personally. In late November of 2022, my daughter Gianna experienced a very unexpected shutdown of her digestive system that ultimately she had a very courageous battle, and also the resolution realizing that she wasn't going to get better, and so she ended up transitioning from this earthly place on March 17th of 2023 in a very incredibly dignified and autonomous way that she went out quite peacefully, but it was still obviously very difficult for our family. And then quite unexpectedly, even more so, my oldest son Giacomo had a very similar shutdown of his gut in October of 2024, and he decided that he didn't want to die in a hospital. And so we took a very long road trip from Minnesota, where I'm from, all the way across to the East Coast down to Florida, and parked here in New Orleans for Christmas because they had spent some time here with me, and they love New Orleans. They love all the ghost tours and the food and the French market and everything about it here. So we spent a wonderful Christmas here, and then on to the rest of his trip out to the West Coast. And ultimately, he did have a very peaceful end of his life in Sedona on January 25th of this year of 2025. And so, there's been lots of times along the way, I could have stopped, I could have taken an extension, and I just said, this is, our motto in life is just kind of keep going. And people, they say, well, I don't know, how do you do it? And I say, you just have to keep going. I have a little picture on my windowsill in my kitchen that someone gave me when Giacomo was in the hospital. It says, this is terrible, keep going. And the license plates on my car, they say, keep going. And that's just what we have to kind of keep doing. So I knew that because being in this program is inspired by them and for them, I had to keep going. And as luck would have it, I had a really wonderful experience this last May in Peru as part of my doctorate program. And I got to spend some time with Dean Leviste, and then came home and kind of processed that experience as well with Dr. Chang, and decided that in addition to the nonprofit, that the best course of action for me is to actually start a business out of this. And so I'm in the process of starting a business called Symbiotic Health, working with the Tulane Innovation Institute, and that the idea would be to create a really well-respected support position similar to what a birth doula does in birth, but this is what we're thinking of being as a health doula to help people with their mental and physical health, that will support families, will support patients, children living with chronic illness or childhood onset, as well as medical professionals. So doctors, nurses who really experience a ton of burnout, who often don't get the mental health support that they need. And so the whole symbiotic nature of this is looking at the patient or the child, the family, the caregivers, and the medical community. How do we all work together? Because a symbiotic relationship is dependent on the other, and sometimes symbiotic relationships can be helpful, and sometimes they can be harmful and cause more, in this case, pain, trauma, suffering. And so the whole goal is to improve communication, to improve support, and to really be that bridge between the patient, family, and the medical profession. And when I worked as a birth doula, people always ask, well, what exactly do you do? And the easiest way I could describe it is that it's non-medical, of course, but I'm just softening the edges around the situation, softening the edges around birth. And in this case now, as I'm moving forward, as I said, I'm in my final year here at Tulane, and really getting all of these final, I would say, plans put in place, because we are very far from this coming to fruition, but I have a really solid foundation, and that what I'll be doing is really softening the edges around that medical experience for people, especially these high stress, chronic illness ones for the kids, families, patients, and then anyone that we encounter within the medical system.